Well, good evening, everybody. My name is David Weisberg. I am the CEO of the Federation for Jewish Philanthropy of Upper Fairfield County in Connecticut. I first want to say a Happy New Year, Shana Tova, a good Yantif, whatever is the greeting that makes you happiest at this time of year. We're just happy that you're getting to join us tonight for what I think is going to be a really wonderful conversation with a really a great author and comedian and our friend here in our community, Michael Ian Black. We're so delighted that so many of you are joining us tonight, not only from Connecticut, but from around the country. And so I want to express my gratitude to all of our partners who have joined with us tonight, resulting in a registration of well over 100 participants for tonight's program. And so much thanks to UJA JCC Greenwich in Greenwich, Connecticut, the Jewish Federation of Omaha, Jewish Nevada, the Jewish Federation of Delaware, the Jewish Federation of Greater Harrisburg, my hometown, the Jewish Federation of Northeastern New York, the Jewish Federation of Southern Arizona, the Jewish Federation of Florida's Gulf Coast, hi Dad, the Jewish Federation of Sarasota Manatee, the Jewish Federation of Greater New Haven, and the Jewish Federation of Silicon Valley, and so many others who have joined us from around the country as well. I'm really delighted tonight to be joined by a wonderful comedian and a friend. Our community in Upper Fairfield, County, Connecticut, covers a lot of towns with names like Bridgeport, Norwalk, and Westport, and Trumbull, and Fairfield. It also includes a town named Reading, and that Reading Jewish community includes a lot of wonderful people, including our special guest tonight. And so I am pleased to welcome my friend and our constituent, Michael Ian Black. Michael, how are you?
Hello, David. Hello, everybody who is here. Happy New Year.
I'm always, just relieved when that works and we push a button and you're there. My staff, we always get nervous before when we do webinars. I said, one of the things that's happened these days is that the playing field has really been leveled. So I say, I could be watching CNN and somebody's phone rings or the dog jumps or they get cut off accidentally. So it's a very level playing field today. So thank you so much for joining us in this, in this Zoom normal that we're in right now.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, this is a really great event and opportunity, and I'm delighted to be here.
So first of all, Shana Tova, Happy New Year. How are you? How does it feel to have a new book out?
It feels good. One of the weird things about writing a book is that you write it, and because the process of publishing is the way it is, it's done months and months before it ever comes out. And in particular, this book was supposed to come out in May, and then everything happened, so it got delayed further. So it's been like being in labor for months and months and months. And having witnessed my wife go through labor twice, I can tell you that's an uncomfortable feeling.
So I just finished reading the book. It is wonderful. I think the most important thing I want to do first and foremost tonight is tell everyone where and how to buy it. And I'm going to do that again later. Your folks at Algonquin Books said what they would really prefer everyone to do is go to a website called bookshop.org and buy it there. And they said, buy it there because it supports local bookstores. And I know, among the many things that all of us want to do now is help to keep our local restaurants and our local store owners, and that includes our local bookstores as well. So I thought that was a great suggestion. So please, everyone go to bookshop.org. You'll see that they have Michael's book prominently featured there, including, I should say, a very nice little quote from a review from the New York Times that says, surprising, Black's tone is so lovely, his empathy so clear, It's a really beautiful thing. I wonder if you took any note of the word surprising and said, hey, wait a second.
I'm noting it right now as you say it. It's like, oh, we weren't expecting this to be good. No, it was a really nice review in the Times. I was pleasantly relieved more than anything else that it was a good review.
So I want to start out by asking you this question. So I don't have to go on bookstore.org. I go right to my independent bookseller, to my local bookstore. I go up to the clerk. I say, I'm here to buy Michael Ian Black's new book, A Better Man. What section do you have that book in? What do you want the answer to be?
The bestseller section, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not optimistic about that. Well, it's not a humor book, so I would be disappointed if it was in the humor section. Maybe memoir, maybe parenting. I don't know. I'm not sure what section it belongs in, because it's not a parenting guide. I'm not a guy who pretends to have a lot of answers as to how to raise your kids. And it's not, strictly speaking, a memoir, although it has a lot of memoir-ish qualities to it. It's a reflection, and I don't know that they have the reflection category in bookshops. But every book is a reflection.
Right. And just explain to us, briefly what the book is.
Sure. It's entitled A Better Man, A Mostly Serious Letter to My Son. And that's exactly what it is. It is a mostly serious letter to my son about being a guy, about being a father, a man, and a son. It is about all the kind of confusing rigmarole about what it means to be a man in 2020. Contrasted with what it has meant in the past and where I think it's going.
Right. And, to be clear with everyone, the book is funny. It's not that it's not a funny book. I laughed when I read it a lot. I was also deeply moved by it as a parent. You're best known as being a comedian. You're also an author. You're a writer. You're many things. What's your process in going to the publisher and saying, yes, I'm a comedian, but this is the book that I want to write?
This is the first time that a publisher approached me. And it's because I had written an op-ed for the New York Times about this subject. And basically it started after the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting a couple of years ago. And I had been very vocal and interested in the subject of gun violence for years, since Sandy Hook, which occurred in our neck of the woods. And I wrote a Twitter thread about gun violence, which was just asking a simple question. It was a question that I hadn't really heard anybody ask, which is, why is it that it's boys and young men who are pulling the triggers on these crimes? And not just these crimes, basically all crimes. Men and boys commit the vast majority of violence, not just in America, but around the world. And I wrote a Twitter thread about it, and then the New York Times asked me to write an op-ed about it, and I did. And then my publisher, Algonquin, asked me to write a book about it. And so I did. It was the first time that I'd been approached to write a book, as opposed to me approaching a publisher to write a book.
Mm-hmm. So, this book starts out talking about the process of becoming a father, and that moment in the hospital, that moment that, by the way, I love as well, where you hear that it's that you've waited here. First of all, there was no gender reveal policy, gender reveal parties that were ever conceived of or contemplated in your life.
No, and I'm very happy to have missed that particular trend in the culture. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's a special moment. At the birth.
Yeah, I think it's a special moment that you wait for. I've never wanted to know in advance, either with my children or with my grandchild.
Well, the thing is, it's like, I guess when I talk about it in the book, I'm really kind of asking the question, what difference does it make? I mean, it's just not my concern in the moment. Like, which gender is the kid going to be? Just let me know that everything's okay. But it's funny because it's the very first thing they do. They tell you it's a boy or it's a girl. And as soon as they do, it's like something clicks in your brain and your ideas for who this child is going to be suddenly get segmented in a very peculiar way. You don't mean it to, but it happens kind of unconsciously. You know, as soon as they say it's a boy, a whole set of expectations start falling into place for you that are unnecessary and I think largely irrelevant, especially in that moment.
Right, right. It was interesting. I had a situation when 2 years ago, when we were waiting for my grandchild to be born, I didn't even want to know the names that my daughter had picked out. She accidentally let the girl's name slip. And I said, well, then you need to tell me the boy's name as well. And then for a short period of time in my head, both of those children actually existed.
Uh-huh.
So
You had Schrodinger's grandchild.
And so then I had to, I gained one, but then the one wasn't there either. And it's just, to me, so interesting in that waiting for that moment.
Yeah, it is a kind of fascinating moment. And, people talk about, well, we wanted the surprise of wanting to know if it was a boy or a girl, but it's like in that moment, everything's surprising. There's a child entering the world. There's plenty of surprise without that being the paramount concern. I mean, of course you want to know, and of course it's exciting to find out, but it is interesting to me the way that moment does sort of eliminate, as you were talking about, like the kind of wholeness of humanity that sort of exists in this platonic ideal of this child, and it gets cut in half all of a sudden. Not in a bad way, but it happens.
Right. Do you think you would have written this book if your oldest child was a daughter?
I don't know. I mean, I do have a daughter. I have an older son and a younger daughter.
And just so everyone knows, your children are how old, both of them?
My son is now 19. My daughter's 17. But I did feel like I had something specific to communicate to my son. And it's not like I ignore my daughter in this book at all. I mean, I talk about her a lot. But I guess I wrestled a lot throughout my life with kind of what it meant to be a man. What does that mean? There's not any kind of accepted cultural definition for what manhood is. We have sort of vague ideas that seem to keep changing. And I think because I lost my dad when I was quite young, I was 12 when he died, and my parents had been divorced before that, so I didn't see him that much, plus he worked a lot. I never really felt like I had a role model that I could observe kind of on a daily basis to sort of understand how he approached that question. And I felt a real lack of that in my life growing up. My mom is gay, so I grew up in a lesbian household. And I really sort of felt I felt the lack of having an adult man in my life. And I think that led to some confusion about sort of how I wanted to present myself as a man. And so I wanted to give my son a letter that I wanted to give my son the conversation that I wish my own dad had been able to have with me. So that's what this is.
Right. So I want to talk about, you talk about kind of not only the power in, that's given to men, but also kind of the stigma that exists at the same time. You write about toxic masculinity, and I want to read a little segment from your book. You say, worry that the term toxic masculinity is a little like the phrase New Jersey native. Both are impossible to hear without feeling a little defensive. I don't want you to feel that way about being a guy. Yes, be aware of certain bilious and worse behaviors men sometimes display. Yes, be sensitive to women's concerns for their safety and well-being. Yes, do the steady work of self-improvement, but I worry that continuously describing male expression as toxic has the cumulative effect of denying the goodness in men. Do you think it becomes an excuse for men to say, oh, there's toxic masculinity, that's just who we are, we just behave this way?
Well, that's what I worry about. I worry that because we don't have the healthy model of masculinity to contrast toxic masculinity with, that those two words have become bonded. And so we think of masculinity as inherently toxic, and it's not. Like, there's just so many great things about guys that I really want to celebrate and elevate. And at the same time, I want to acknowledge how much work we have to do on ourselves. I don't think those are contradictory sentiments. I think they're complementary sentiments. And so, yeah, I try not to use that term too much because it just, it makes me feel like New Jersey native. Incidentally, I am a New Jersey native. So, it was self-deprecating.
Right. And, clearly this is a book that you wrote to your son. It's also a book that you've written to every other parent and every other father.
Yeah. I mean, I could have kept this a private letter to my son, but it's a book, and it's meant to be digested by a broad audience, and not just of parents, of boys. I hope that men who are just sort of interested in themselves are curious about it, and that women who are curious about the men in their lives and want to help the men in their lives, I hope they have some interest in reading it. And incidentally, again, like I'm not an expert, I'm not an academic. I'm not a historian. I'm a comedian who sometimes says funny things on TV and sometimes says funny things on Zoom webinars. But I'm just presenting this as one guy talking to other guys and women. But it's absolutely from the perspective of a layperson.
Right. So this is a Jewish webinar. This is the week between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I personally started a practice today that I do every year of calling friends and loved ones and asking for forgiveness for things that I might have done wrong to them over the course of the year.
I didn't get a call today, David. I did not get a call from you.
Well, I'm alphabetical in terms of first name. And so
you haven't gotten to the M's
right away. But and I wanted to wait until after I wronged you tonight, because if I had done it before, I would have left myself no margin for error. So tomorrow you'll get a call from me. You write about forgiveness in this book. You wrote to your son, you're going to mess up. Everybody does. I do constantly. I mean, you live with me, so you already know that. That's okay. Messing up is part of the deal, but so is asking forgiveness. So is accepting apologies from others, forgiving them for their mistakes, and so is forgiving yourself, which may be the hardest one of all. I want to ask you, I think, a deep and difficult question, and maybe it overlays with that topic of toxic masculinity. When we're talking about forgiveness, and you work in the entertainment world and the comedy world, and there are so many people, and I'm sure people whose, I don't want to say their careers and lives have been derailed, because in many ways, they brought these things on themselves, where stories come out of things where they're seeking redemption. And I'm interested in your thoughts about that question of forgiveness and redemption, and whether there are limits and what our obligations are as a community to forgive others.
I do know people who have been accused of, and in some cases acknowledged, misbehavior in the comedy community. It's painful when it's a peer. It's painful when it's somebody you know. It's painful when it's somebody you might be friendly with. I find it very easy to condemn from afar. I find it very easy to read a bold-faced name and say, that guy should never work again, or that guy is irredeemable. And then it happens to somebody you know. And in my case, I felt really my sense of condemnation was no less acute. But for the first time, I think because I have known people, my sense of wanting to find mercy, I found also growing. When Louis C.K. was accused and admitted, I've known Louis for 20 years. I wouldn't say that we're particularly close, but I know him and I like him. I found myself really wrestling with this. And I wrote a Twitter thread about it and asking the same question that you're asking. How do we find it within ourselves to forgive? If we're the person who has wronged, how do we seek redemption? What is the nature of our own mercy? Are we obligated to display mercy? I didn't phrase it nearly as well then as I'm phrasing it now. And I got lambasted for days on Twitter for even asking the question. And it was really painful. It was really painful. And I felt horrible because I was asking a question that I feel like I'd heard a lot in private, but not in public. This question that you're asking. Concurrent with that, a friend of mine had died. And I found myself really affected by his death and really sort of searching for that question. Where does mercy come from? How do we find it? How do we seek it? One of the things I learned from that lesson is we don't owe anybody forgiveness. It's a blessing, I think, if we can offer it. Some people may never be in a position where they can offer it. It's not incumbent on us to intervene on behalf of others, which is essentially what I was doing with Louis. And I didn't even feel like I was intervening on his behalf personally. It was more of a general question, and I was using him as an example. But ultimately, it felt like a defense of him, and I think on some level it was.
Right, and I know that was a difficult question, and I think that this is a season of difficult questions, and I think that the question of forgiveness around this time of year, I think a lot of people just look at it as it can become a rote exercise if we don't really think about what it means. I think for some people it's just, well, it would easy to stand in synagogue. You can't stand in synagogue this year for most people, but it's it's easy to stand there and say, ask redemption for this and that and that. And, I think it's important that these things just not become a rote exercise.
Yeah, I don't think forgiveness is rote. I think it's easy to say, I accept your apology. I think it's much harder to inhabit that. Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard thing. And incidentally, I think it's equally hard, as I said in the book, to forgive yourself, maybe harder.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's interesting talking about the notion of religious practice being a rote exercise. It's something I think that you wrote about well in the book, in talking to your son, and about the choice of whether to be a religious or a spiritual person. And you write, if you do find religion one day, great. If you don't, also great. I would caution you, though, that your religious life and your spiritual life are related but different subjects. Becoming a member of a religion may guide your spiritual life, but it won't by itself solve whatever spiritual problems you encounter. Religion provides a framework, but you still have to do the work. It's like going to the gym. They give you the equipment, but it won't do you any good if you never break a sweat.
Yeah.
And, I think if anything, we just probably engaged in that practice of breaking a sweat.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, honestly, it's what I want to do. Like, I'm very interested in that kind of work, whether you want to call it spiritual or self-reflective or whatever you want to call it. Like, that's all really compelling to me. It might just be that I've reached a time in my life where I'm trying to really understand myself better, ground myself better, and reach deep into the soil of my own humanity and see what I come up with. That comes with maturity, I think. I did write those words to my son, and I mean them wholeheartedly. He's half Catholic, half Jewish. He, at the moment, considers himself, I think, an agnostic, which is why I say if you choose to enter into religion. But I do think that spiritual work and religious work are correlated. They're related, but they're not the same thing at all. Religion is a tool, and I would encourage him to use whatever tools he sees fit to use.
Right. You write in your book to your son about developing a habit of consideration. What's a habit of consideration?
To use the tritest version of that, it's stopping and smelling the roses, but it's also stopping and smelling the dog poo that's underfoot. It is, in my opinion, moments of consciousness. Another way to say it is being present for stuff and not living, as I so often do, in your own head, and living apart from the people in your lives, but trying to live with them in the moment and engaging with them. It's a tough practice, and it's something I have to continually remind myself to do. And I'm thinking about it now and thinking about how I, maybe even messed up today, thinking, the consideration isn't necessarily consideration in terms of kindness for other people, although I certainly hope he would demonstrate a lot of that. It's a consideration of the moment that you are in.
Right. You just, by the way, brought new meaning to me to a scene in a very funny movie that I had never thought about. Do you know the movie Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story?
Yeah, I've seen it once.
John C.
I
Reilly.
remember it very well.
Very, very funny movie. And he loses his sense of smell, which he gets back at the end. And the first thing he smells is a flower, and he's so excited to smell a flower. And the next thing he smells is he goes down on the ground and smells, some dog or a horse, and is equally as excited that he's able to smell that again. And it's not only but it's the breadth of being able to smell everything, I suppose, that is part of that habit of consideration that you're talking about.
And it's a joy that we have the full breadth of experience that we can draw on to consider.
Right. So in a few moments, we're going to open up the lines, as they say, for questions from attendees. And so I want to give you a heads up that we're going to do this in a couple of ways. I want to ask you, if you can, to both raise your virtual hand and to type your question into the chat feature so I know what it is you want to ask about. And what we're going to try to do, if you've raised your virtual hand, is move you temporarily from being an attendee to a panelist, which means if you have your camera on, you will be on the screen with Michael and me. I want to give you that heads up in case you're wearing your pajamas and you don't want anyone to see that, or you're, wearing some, I don't know, I won't even say what else. But you'll be brought onto the screen with us. I'll also note my rule as a moderator of question asking is that a question is one sentence with a maximum of 1 comma. And that way we'll allow as many people as possible.
I wish my answers were as pithy as that. One sentence with a comma.
No limits on you, Michael. So while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I want to ask you, as a leader in our Jewish community, just the importance of community. To you, the importance of community in talking to your son as to how to become the best adult he can be.
I talk about how the way we learn to construct our lives as children has a lot to do with sort of 3 concentric layers. The first layer is our immediate sort of parenting layer, the people who model behavior for us first and foremost. And those are really important. The second level of that, I think, is maybe the more critical one, particularly as we get a little bit older, which is our peers and our community, the people around us, the environment that we're in, the support that we get. It's critical, I think, to forming us into coherent, positive people. In my own case, when I was growing up as an adolescent, I knew that my community was, and I'm talking about my New Jersey community, really wasn't the community that I needed. I knew that I needed to leave, and I needed to find my people. And so I went to New York City. I went to New York University, and was really fortunate because I found a bunch of people who shared my interests and my passions, and that's the kind of found community that I have inhabited ever since. And it's, it means the world to me.
Right. How has the past 6 months affected your connection to community and who your community is?
Surprisingly, it hasn't hurt. Part of it has to do with the fact that I already live in the wilds of Connecticut. And so many of my relationships with people exist online, or through text or through telephone. So many of my friends are in Los Angeles or New York City. So I don't get to see them as often as I would like on a regular basis. And I live a lot of my life online. So the past few months have been challenging for everybody, of course, but in terms of just like maintaining community, it hasn't been bad at all, and I'm grateful for that.
Great. So I have a question that somebody typed in. They're not raising their virtual hand, so I'm not going to bring them on the screen. This is from LG. I've read and enjoyed so many of your books and have been impressed by your openness in them all. Are there any topics you feel are too personal to write about? Anything you would be uncomfortable to explore publicly this way? Probably because that means that I'm going to ask you about them next.
Well, you're welcome to. The only things that I am reluctant to talk about are things in which, or topics that aren't my story to tell. So I'm happy to talk about anything with me. Like I will live as openly as I can. There's nothing off limits for me, but like I wouldn't reveal things about my son, for example, that he may not want to be revealed, or my wife that she may not want to be revealed. I do talk about them, of course, and I do reveal some personal information, but nothing that I feel like would really hurt or upset them.
Right. Do you have a conversation with them before you write this book?
They knew I was writing it. I did show it to my wife as I was writing it. She didn't object to anything that she was reading. I offered for my son to read it, and he was like, "It's fine. I'm not going to read it." My son hasn't read. My son has started reading the book finally, but it was sitting on his night table for months, with me going, "Have you looked at that?" "No, I haven't. I haven't read it. I haven't read it." He was joking that it would be one of the first things he read after I died, but he has since picked it up, and he has since started reading it.
Right. So Gail wants to know, how long did it take to write your book?
This book, for me, as I'm not a quick writer by any means, happened quickly. It took less than a year, I want to say, of writing. I did a few months of research, of just like reading whatever I could find on the topic. But the actual writing took less than a year, and that's fast for me.
All right, so I am trying to bring one of our questioners on with us. I think this is Joanna, who hopefully will be joining us in a moment. But while we're waiting for her to join us, question, how important is comedy and humor in your relationship with your son? And has he inherited the humor gene?
It's super important. We joke around a lot. He has a really good dry sense of humor, which I guess I share. He takes particular glee in making the most atrocious puns that he can possibly think of, because he knows how upsetting it is to me to hear his atrocious puns. But yeah, he's got a really good sense of humor, and he's a really sweet kid. And it's one of the best ways that we have to communicate with each other.
Great. Hi, Joanna. How are you?
Oh, hi. So
Joanna,
good. How are you?
Where in the world are you, Joanna?
I'm in LA.
Well, hello. Welcome from LA. So glad you could join us. I know you have a question for Michael.
I do. Hi. Thanks for being here. So when you have an idea that you would like to explore publicly, how do you decide the venue with which to share it with us? Whether it's a book or TV or film, how do you make that decision?
A lot, maybe just experience. A lot of times the idea itself will kind of tell me what it wants to be. I know that sounds stupid, but some things just feel like one thing or another. I mean, these ideas and thoughts I feel like could only be a book. I was approached to make it into a television series. And I was like, I don't see how it could be a television series. Just some things feel right. They feel like the paradigm that they're in feels like the right paradigm. And by the way, I mean, a lot of times I write terrible things that never see the light of day anywhere. I mean, that's just the nature, I think, of being a creative person.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Joanna.
Thanks, Joanna.
So while we bring on the next person, we'll also get questions like this one from Alan, who just says, any plans for an Ed reunion?
No, I would love to. And I remain close. It is a television show that I was on, and it was 20 years ago. And I remain close with the star of the show, the guy who played Ed, Tom Cavanaugh. I remain friendly with everybody else. And I just don't think there's any desire for it in the marketplace other than for you. And if you want to finance it, great. I'm totally ready and willing and able to do it.
So I want to welcome another Michael. I want to acknowledge that I knew this Michael growing up from our days together in BBYO Jewish Youth Group back in Pennsylvania. So it's good to see him again. Hi, Michael Neal.
David,
you're on with Michael Ian Black.
Shana Tova. Michael, nice to meet you too, and Shana Tova to you as well.
Thank you, same to you.
So my question for you is, what is your most memorable Jewish comedic experience and why?
When I was in my mid-20s, a friend of mine who's a comedian became involved in the Friars Club in New York City, which is, if you don't know, a kind of legendary social club for performers. And at the time, the heads of it were Alan King and Freddie Roman, both just like tremendous Jewish Borscht Belt comedians who, I got to know a little bit. Henny Youngman would be in the dining room when you would go. He had like his own booth that he would be there. He would be there every day. And the whole spirit of the place was so kind of that era, that Borscht Belt, over the top, big joke, loud, boisterous energy. And in fact, they were doing a show at that time, Freddie was, called Catskills on Broadway. And Alan might have been in it too, which was just that. It was just Jewish comics on a stage telling jokes. And I remember that moment in my life of, participating in the Friars Club just made me feel really connected to not only comedians, but specifically to Jewish comedians and that long tradition, which I just love. I mean, I just adore it.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for making me laugh so many times over the years.
Thanks for attending tonight. I really appreciate it.
It's
very
good
welcome. Thank you, David, for doing this.
All right. So I think that Sarah might be joining us, but we'll see if Sarah is coming on. But if not, while we're waiting for Sarah, so I want to ask you, there's Sarah. Hi, Sarah. We just need to unmute you. There you are.
Hi, how are you?
You're on with Michael.
So great to speak to you both. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Where are you?
I'm in Greenwich, Connecticut, so not too far.
Great.
And my husband just downloaded your book, and I think he follows you on Twitter now, so you have a new thing.
Please thank him.
Yeah. I have 2.5-year-old twins, so we're new to the whole parenting game and always open to advice. I'm just wondering if you had any regrets or anything you'd change.
Oh my gosh. I mean, infinite regrets. It's like you raise your voice, you say the wrong thing, you do the wrong thing. I encouraged my son to jump off a slide once and he twisted his ankle and it was really hurt. I've done so many dumb things as a parent, but I feel like I've learned a couple things too. The most important, there's two things. The first is I feel like I understand the job of a parent and I feel like it's simple. And the job of a parent is to let your kids know that they're safe and that they're loved. And that's basically it. Like, you're not there to entertain them. You know, you're not there to be their buddy all the time. Like, you're there to make sure they know they're safe and they're loved. That's the first thing. The second thing I feel like I've learned is that you, as a parent, have no ability to affect who your child is. Like, we can try to steer our kids one way or steer our kids another, and it's pointless. Yeah. They will tell you who they are. And our job is to just listen and just receive that information. Like, you provide them with to the best of your ability, with a panoply of experiences and opportunities, but they're going to tell you who they are, you know? And it's so funny because I feel like, knowing my kids now and looking at them in hindsight, like, they've been the same since they were infants. You know what I mean? Like, they're the same people from moment one that they are today. They just express themselves a little bit better.
Right.
Are you finding that?
Yeah. I mean, my kids, they're getting little personalities and expressing what they do and don't want. And I have a boy and a girl, so they're totally different and, you know, different interests. And I think that's great advice. Just guide them and kind of hold their hand and let them decide what they want to do. And
what has surprised you about being a parent?
How hard it is. And I'm a working mom. I work full time, and, you know, I wake up early and go to the gym and go to work and come home and make dinner and, you know, basically go to sleep and do it all over again. And I love my kids and I love my family and I love my husband, but
But you're exhausted, but it's hard.
It's so hard.
You're in baby jail. The first 5 years to me are what I call baby jail, which is, it's all consuming. But then every day that you're in baby jail, the door opens just a tiny bit more as your kids get a little more independent and they can feed themselves and get potty trained, like all those little developmental steps. It's like the door to baby jail opening bit after bit. But eventually it does swing open, not entirely. You will always be somewhat in baby jail for as long as you have kids.
Sarah, thanks so much. And
thank you both.
Your husband is buying the book from bookstore.org. If he's not telling anybody. Okay.
I will. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. You know, Michael, you talked about our responsibilities as being a parent. Is another responsibility to embarrass your children occasionally in public?
Of course. I mean, I feel like that's almost a primary responsibility at this point. Like, as soon as they're capable of being embarrassed by you, I feel like, especially as a dad, like, your job is to take full advantage of that. And to embarrass them.
There's like some driving parental force to like dance in the supermarket or, Dad, stop.
Yeah, because of the glee. I mean, it's because the deeper their embarrassment, the more gleeful you feel as a parent that you're able to do that. That is a source of constant joy to me.
Right, and I know you'll answer this question with great humility, but how do your children feel about being Michael Ian Black's children?
Oh, they don't give a shit. I mean, they don't care. And incidentally, I'm glad. Like, and I'm not going to exaggerate my level of celebrity, which is at best C-list. But I do have some notoriety. I do appear on television. I do appear on webinars and in the public. And they care so little about that. And it pleases me to no end, because I really don't want to be anything to them other than their dad.
Right. So, I want to ask you a question about Judaism, and I know that you don't consider yourself observant. You would say you aren't observant, but you write about the sense of responsibility and identity that you have as being a Jew. And once again, this is a Jewish webinar, so we should talk about these things.
Yeah, I want to.
And you're right. All of this is to say that our history as Jews gives you additional responsibilities to other people. First, we're obliged to lift up others as a recognition of the privilege we've been afforded. Second, we are obliged to speak up on behalf of others as a recognition of the history our people endured when few people spoke up for us. I will be the first to admit that I've not done enough to lift people up. As I've gotten older and my recognition of my responsibilities has grown, I've tried to do more. I will continue to do more. So, what part of that comes from being Jewish? What part of that comes from just being you, Michael?
I don't know that I can separate the two, although I am not observant, as you say. I have always felt deeply Jewish. I have always identified as Jewish and felt into the marrow of my bones that I am a Jew. A lot of that, I think, has to do with growing up at a time, and so my formative years were the 80s, right? And World War II in particular felt like very recent history. It felt like I could touch it. And I was very aware of that history. And I was very aware of what felt like a kind of, I don't want to put too strong a word on, I don't want to make it sound more than it is, but a kind of conditional acceptance that I feel like Jews have received wherever we've been, including in America, where there's a sense that we have to, and I think all immigrant populations probably feel this, prove ourselves to deserve to be where we are. And the concern that whatever historical animosities there have been towards us could show up again at any moment. Like I was aware of all of that growing up. And it made me feel really tied to my Judaism in a way that I really embraced. The ethnicity aspect of it, the historical aspect of it. I didn't grow up with religion and so didn't really understand the religion, but I absolutely felt like I understood and appreciated and loved the culture.
So I am going to bring in Lauren. Lauren, we're waiting for you to join us. While we're waiting for Lauren, we last did a program about food together. Michael, do you have a favorite Jewish food?
I mean, yes. I love, well, two. And I don't know if this is, I mean, is this really Jewish? I consider it Jewish, but my absolute favorite is a bagel and lox and like the whole thing, like the lettuce, the tomato, the red onion, good lox, good bagel, the cream cheese, like all of that. But is that more of a New Yorkie thing ultimately? I don't know.
No, we've got a flag in that one.
Okay, good. Then that's what I'll choose. That's
we've planted a flag in that one. Hi, Lauren. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you guys?
Good. Where are you, Lauren?
I am in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh, wow. Welcome. I hope you're doing well and safe and healthy, and we're happy to have you on with Michael.
Yes, thank you so much. This is kind of going back to the last question. So we're currently in the baby jail, I guess, where we have 3 kids, 5 and under.
Oh.
But we've been constantly told during our lives, and excuse one of my children, that it just gets harder. Oh, as we're so exhausted during this phase, we're being told, just you wait, it just gets harder. And I was wondering if that's if you would agree with that, Michael, if it gets
not harder. In my experience at all. It's not to say that it won't. I mean, for me, the hardest was the beginning. Both of my kids were colicky though. So they were just miserable for months and months and months. That was really the hardest. The first 2 years, I would say, for both of our kids was the hardest. I think communication helps so much, as you start to be able to speak to them and have them understand you, and for them to be able to communicate back, to me was really helpful. And also when they go to school and you're just like, oh my God, they're out of my hair for 5 hours. That's just like the best. I mean, you love your kids, but like just, you want them out of your face once in a while, I'm sure.
Yes, need that break time. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, our oldest is in kindergarten, but it's virtual. So
yeah, in my experience, it does not get harder. Not to say it won't for you, but in my experience, it hasn't.
All right, well, good to hear.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you.
Michael, I know it's not everybody's reality to co-parent. A lot of people are single parents, but talk about the challenges of co-parenting and coming up with the same set of values and decisions together.
I think we've been fortunate in terms of values. We definitely, I think, share most of our values, my wife and myself. But, you know, we express things really differently, and that has caused a lot of friction over the years. I tend to be more of the disciplinarian. She tends to be a little bit more permissive. She definitely has kind of nurturing skills that I sometimes lack, and I blame a lot of that just like on my own like maleness that needs improvement and work. But then sometimes the roles reverse, oddly, you know, it just really depends. I think, you know, so far we've done okay. You know, we've got 2 kids who are healthy and relatively happy. But I think every family has their own challenges. Every family has their own strengths. And again, like I definitely don't pretend to be a parenting expert. I'm just doing the best that I can with my dumb kids.
Yeah, you write in the end of the book about your son leaving home and how your relationship changes forever when that happens. Your daughter is how old?
17. She's a senior.
So I mean, just tell me about your anticipation of becoming an empty nester, you know, when the world also, you know, I just read that, you know, 50% of, I think, kids between 20 and 30 are now living at home. So yeah. in a different, more normalized world, your anticipation, not only of being an empty nester, but the changing nature of your relationship when you have adult children.
Well, my son is now home from college. He's 19. He took this quarter off because of COVID. So we've had him unexpectedly home since last March. And it's been great in some ways to just have him around. In some ways, I think my wife and I both feel really bad. You know, we want him to be gone, not for us, but for him, because it does feel like they get to a point in their lives where I wanted him to be on his own. I wanted him to experience those things for himself. I wanted him to be away from our shadow and starting to live his own life. And, you know, when he's home, it reverts to form, which is fine. We're happy that he's here. But I look forward to being an empty nester. I say that now that both of my kids are home. Who knows how I'll feel. But I've been really conscious of making sure that I have my own interests and desires and work. There's things that are, you know, really my own, and my wife has things that are her own. And part of that feels like because we're going to be on our own pretty soon. And, you know, it's scary.
Right. In some ways, your book reads, you know, like a roadmap or a treasure hunt as to, you know, what's the secret sauce of being a good man. You know, and it reaches a conclusion at the end where you know, say, you know, the simple secret of manhood is love. And I think that's reinforced by your saying that, you know, the soft skills of manhood, some things that people see as more feminine things, the changing diapers and waking up in the middle of the night, are the things that made you feel most like a man. Mm-hmm. And so just, you know, what is it that you've discovered as being a man? What do you want folks to take away from this book? What would you want your son to take away if and when he actually reads it?
I want him to understand that being a man is half of the equation of being a human, that we are full spectrum humans, that we are capable of providing and protecting our families and our loved ones the way men have always done. and will continue to do. But women also provide and protect their families. That does not diminish who you are as a guy at all. It enhances it, because there is a tremendous amount of strength and surety of self to be able to say, I need help, to be able to offer and receive love, to be able to care for and be cared for. All of that stuff is what makes somebody a kind of full spectrum person. And I want him to inhabit that full spectrum of his humanity, because I think he will feel most like a man when he does.
Right. Right. So I want to thank you for sharing your time with us. I want to thank you for publishing this book now. I think it comes at a really good time. And, you know, for me, this conversation comes at a really good time in this, this week between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when so many of us are focused on how to be the best person we can be. And I should say, I don't think this is a book just for parents. I don't think it's a book just about men either, in that a fundamental part of the premise is trying to break away from the notion of gender roles and gender norms. That it's really a book that I think can be valuable to everybody. So I want to thank you for writing it, and, you know, for putting on your philosopher, self-helper, you know, parenting guide hat, and, you know, I hope you keep it on, and I hope you'll continue to write books like this that we can all learn from. So I want to thank you. I want to thank all of our listeners. I want to share with everyone once again where you should go to purchase this book, which is at bookshop.org. Of course, it's easy to go on other places. I go on other places and order things all the time. But, you know, once again, I think it's the last time Michael and I were together in the same place was at our friend Melba's restaurant in Harlem. Melba is the head of the New York Hospitality Association. It makes such a difference when you're supporting your local restaurants, and you're supporting your local mom and pop stores, and you're supporting your local bookstore. So we want you to support Michael by buying his book, but you can have double the impact if you go to your local bookstore and do that. So, you know, Michael told us that his wish is when you go in the bookstore and you ask what section it is, that they tell you it's the bestseller section. All of the people on this call, on this webinar, can help make it that way. Michael, thank you for your openness, for your generosity. You were very transparent. You answered some really difficult questions and shared some very personal things. And you know, I know that I'm better off for having this conversation. I'm grateful for our friendship and for your support of our community.
Well, thank you, David. And the same, I feel the same. And also, I think we're all better off that any of us are having these conversations. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to so many of you. It means a lot to me, particularly to be welcomed by my Jewish community. And I really appreciate it.
And Michael, my wish for you and your wife and your son and your daughter is a sweet and joyous, and most importantly, healthy new year, and one that we can get back to community, where your son can go back to school, and we can just, you know, get back to a little sense of normalcy once again. It's so joyous to have you all in our living room this way, but I can't wait until we're out to dinner in Harlem once again.
I would love that.
Thank
and no
you.
need to call. You did nothing to offend me. It was a dream conversation. So
I was a little worried earlier, but thanks so much, and thank you to everyone. Have a happy, sweet, and healthy New Year. Thanks, Michael. Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.